Okay, shall we start right now? Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Chen. Actually, that's my last name. I go by my last name, which is easier for everybody. So I'm going to very briefly describe the A/B testing functionality of the edX platform and give a couple of examples of the things that we're doing or the experiments that we're doing using this A/B testing functionalities. So, you know, as an introduction, teaching is a very old practice, and then came the great internet revolution, and which enables us to teach like this. Well, so obviously we need to find some better ways to teach online. I think that 3 slides is a pretty good summary of a lot of the stuff that we heard today. So how can we, what is the way to find better ways to teach in an online environment? MOOCs has always been, you know, give the same course material to the entire MOOC population. And now we have, what we really need is this capability of giving traditional teaching method to half of the class and give experimental teaching methods, things that we think might work in an online environment, to another group of students and compare them. So this function has just been realized by the edX platform, which allows us to do simple experimental designs like this. First, we give some common course material to the entire population, and then we randomly split the entire MOOC population into 2 groups. So we give half of them the treatment or the experimental teaching method, which we think might work better. We give the other group the control, and then we give them some common assessment, very simple. You can run multiple experiments in a course with not much interference because you can split the course one way doing experiment 1, and then you can split the course the other way doing experiment 2. And these are independent random splits, so one split doesn't carry over to the other split. You randomize them every time. And if experiment 1 has multiple parts, you can also remember your split. So if you run experiment 1 part 1 and experiment 2 in between, you can still remember what the first split is, and you can use the same split in another later unit, which is very useful to us because right now there is no method for a student to say that I opt out of any experiment. So we need to be fair to everybody. What we did was that we switched the treatment and control groups for our experiments. So every time everybody has a fair share of both experimental and traditional types of teaching. A little summary of some of the features. There's no limits on the number of groups that we can have in, you can split the class into a large number of different groups, hundreds of groups, which is possible given a MOOC, given the scale of a MOOC. Each group can receive a different number of materials, which I mean one group can receive 5 problems and the other group can receive 3 videos. You can do that. Group assignment is completely random, so you can't say I manually match 2 populations because they have the same abilities. Right now, the course creator has no control on the assignment process. We rely on central limit theory for fairness. And no student can opt out of any of the experiments. A student can't say, I don't want to participate, just give me something that you used last semester. Well, sorry, you have to, we try to give you a flavor of everything, but you have to be part of that. Okay, so I'm going to give you some example of the experiments that we run in this course. First of all, our course is called 8MRev Mechanics Review, which is a college introductory level mechanics, calculus-based mechanics course. It runs for 14 weeks, 12 required units, 2 optional units, and as you can see, it started May 29th and it's still not ended, which is why today I don't have any data to present to you, and I'll get to that later. initially registered is a little bit above 10,000. What is that? Attempted, about 4,000 people attempted the second week's quiz, estimated. So we ran a total of 7 A/B experiments in our course. A lot of them are of interest specifically to physics educators, such as, does a diagram really help students solve the problems? And there are some research that shows giving a diagram actually makes students less likely to draw a diagram of their own, thus not helping them on problem solving. So we did something like giving a problem with or without a diagram. But today I'm going to mainly talk about a couple of them, which I think is more interesting to the more general audience. The first one says, does length of a video make a difference? There's research that says people are more engaged in shorter videos, and we wanted to see if that is true and how short does a video have to be. So what happened is that we have these office hour videos where Dave talks to students, and these are called office hour videos, and they're 10 minutes in length. And they talk about a challenging homework problem. And when we look at them, we think that they're a little bit too long and students might not be focusing on it all the time. So what we did is that we cut the videos into short 2-minute segments of the videos, each covering sort of their own little topic. And we placed some questions in between these videos and gave it to the students. As a control, we gave the whole 10-minute video at once and give the students the exact same questions that were interleaved as a reminder of the content of the video. So we set up the experiment like this. They were faced with this challenging homework problem, and they are encouraged to attempt this once, and they are directed to this video help session where half of them receive the long video version, half of them receive the short video version. They were then, after watching the video, they have the freedom to choose how long they want to watch these videos or how many questions they want to attempt. And then you come back and do that challenging homework again. So the research questions are, well, are there any difference in time spent watching the videos? And difference in number of questions, how many questions do they answer before they think that, oh, okay, I got the challenging problem and I wanted to go back? Or difference in successfully solving the challenging homework problem after watching the video. Is there a difference in learning? And by the way, these small questions counts like 0.1 points, small enough that nobody would really care. And so I would really like to tell you that the differences that we're seeing, but because of a couple of issues that we really can't pull out any trustworthy data out of it. Right? Yet, exactly, yet. We will be able to eventually. The other big question that we want to ask is it worth it, or is it worth it to increase the interactivity of course material? Because students, I really don't want students to sit in front of the computer screen like watching a video or a movie, just passively receiving the information. I want them to be able to interact with the course material that we give them. And the question is that really helping them to learn? And is it worth it to spend that much effort into increasing the interactivity? So the first thing we did is called traditional problems versus direct measurement problems, which is the great contribution by Peter Bowercheck here. So in a traditional physics problem, you get a diagram, and you get all the information that you need to solve the problem, which is not showing up correctly here. But all the information is the mass and the time is given, and you solve the problem from that. What Peter Bowercheck allows us to do is that he provides this video player that can play frame by frame, which allows you to measure time by counting the frames very precisely. And then he puts this ruler on top of the screen, so the distance is measured by the screen ruler, and then you can measure the position of the angles and all the things that you need. So instead of giving you the information, we let the students measure the information that they need to calculate the problem, the value of the problem. And we sort of give them more detailed instructions at first, and then we let them decide what they want to measure later. So the experimental setup is pretty straightforward. First, we introduced them to the concept. Then one group was given the traditional homework. The other group was given the direct measurement video. And then we asked some survey questions and some common homework problems related to this content to see if there's any learning. Okay, so research questions. Does the extra interactivity result in more participation, or does the extra homework lead to less participation? Anecdotally, I saw two discussion posts related to these videos. One says, I love these contents. The other, I love these videos. The other says, that's why I became a theorist. Can we identify any positive impact in students' knowledge to justify the cost of creating these videos? Not just whether they're able to solve these conventional problems better, but can we, so we ask them, do these videos make you more sensitive to, more aware of experiment errors or the control of errors in experiments? Or we even ask them a question of, if you slightly change something in this experiment, for example, you change the weight, you change the length of the string, will it increase or decrease your measurement uncertainty? Things that are of obvious value to an experimental or any physics expert, but are not really seen very often in a traditional problem. Now, the other experiment that we did is that we decided to attack the traditional multiple choice problems. And we developed something called the drag and drop problem using the drag and drop utility of the edX platform. So in a traditional multiple choice problem, you have the problem body and you have a diagram and you have a couple of choices. What we don't like about it is we really want the students to go back and forth and think about what this math equation means for this physics diagram. But a lot of the time is spent on matching the choices to the diagram, going between here and here, which is not essential to learning. And it can become really bad if you, for example, in this problem, I ask you which of the 12 positions, choose all the possible positions that is valid under this math representation. And so we have a checkbox problem of 12 checkboxes, which is really long. If you're familiar with the education literature, you probably know this is a lot of extraneous cognitive load, which is a term coined by John Sweller, which he claims to be not good for learning. And so how do we... So what we wanted to do is wanted to make these problems a little bit more straightforward. So we designed things like this. Now, in this problem, you're required to identify which of these distances you should use for this r in this equation. And we created this r locator, which you could then drag to the, I'm going to use this as my r. And then I'm going to use this as my alpha, which saves you a lot of the trouble going back and forth between the choices and the content. And here, I mean, it is, you can drag, this point is valid for this equation, and this point is also valid. So you can drag more directly. Does this change, what effect does this change have? Well, also, this utility allows us to do something called deliberate practice, the work by Erickson, which Susan Singer mentioned this morning, that he studied what it takes to become an expert. It takes long and repetitive practice. In more detail, it requires people to focus on practicing one skill at a time. For example, in football, you don't really play the full game every time. It providing immediate specific feedback to the skill that you're practicing on. And then it requires repetitive and highly focused training on this one skill at a time. So if you want to focus on practicing one skill at a time, it relies on domain-specific problem design. We as instructors can design these problems that focus on practicing one skill at a time. auto-grading, customized feedback, this whole online education platform sort of solves the immediate specific feedback side of the issue. And what this increased interactivity is designed to solve is this, to allow people to have repetitive and highly focused training without being overwhelmed by the unnecessary effort of solving the format of the problem. And so we divided the entire population into 3 groups. And one group receives a traditional type of homework. The other group receives a multiple choice homework that focuses on one skill but incurs a lot of extraneous cognitive load. A third group received an interactive drag and drop problem, a bunch of interactive drag and drop problem in that unit. And after this homework session, we subjected them to some common homeworks and then a common quiz. And so these served as assessments as to is there any learning differences between these 3 groups. Well, because we have to be fair to everybody, we have to rotate between all 3 groups, which means we created 9 units worth of homework, which is a lot of work. Which is one thing that we didn't realize initially when we were designing the experiment in the MOOC. So research questions are, does increasing interactivity result in more engagement? Are students more deliberate in terms of the practice? Are they, does this new format make them practice more with the homework? And then compared to traditional problems, do drag and drop problems serve as better or worse assessments? Because a lot of times you have bad problems just because the problem itself is too complicated, not because the content is too hard. And do these solve this kind of problems? The third question is, do deliberate practice results in any detectable learning gain, which is what we wanted to find out. So this is all I have to talk to you. And before, I have a couple of questions that I would like to discuss among us. But before that, I would like to ask if you have any comments or any questions. Yes. Thank you. Could you please? Yeah. Could you please talk into the microphone? Yeah. Thank you. And could you please introduce yourself before?
Zach Pardos, University of California, Berkeley.
Okay.
I have a question about the logistics of running an experiment.
Okay.
When it comes to the discussion forum or other areas where there might be socialization going on.
Yes.
Does it split the forums as well? Yeah.
No, it doesn't. So what happens is that we have, each group has its own discussion forum entrance point. So we have a discussion forum entrance point right beneath the problem, but and you can only see, in that entrance point, you will see all the discussion pertaining to that problem. But if you go to the general discussion forum, you can see other people's discussion about this, about all the other contents. And we have to tell them beforehand, although we don't really want to, that from this week on, you will be seeing some people's posts will not make sense to you, sort of like that, because we're testing different content, and you'll have a chance to experience what they've experienced this week.
Follow up.
And I didn't. Another comment is that I don't really see people being very angry, saying, "Why do these guys receive much more interesting things than I do?" That was one of the initial worries, and that didn't really happen.
If I could be allowed to ask one more question, what guidance can you give with regard to requesting informed consent, or how did you proceed along those lines, and what did your IRB have to say about that? Okay,
so what we did was that we have this little paragraph in our, when they register for the course, we have this little paragraph saying we are doing research in this course, and if you register, clicking register means that you agree to participate in this. We will be trying these innovative instructional methods, and clicking register means that you agree to participate in this. Yeah, that's all we did.
How do you handle students under 18? Because you need parental consent to do this.
Good question. I don't really know the answer to it.
Because we tried running this, and this was actually a very tricky thing. That
Okay.
a substantial number of the students in our class were under 18, and so you either have to, you have to either exclude them or you have to get parental consent.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not following, I don't know if it's federal law or federal guidelines, but you can get in trouble for not doing that. Because they gave us, we tried to get it by the IRB, and this was a big issue where they were like very worried about it.
Okay. Dave, do you know how we get by the issue of people under 18?
That is a very small minority, and, sorry. So, yeah, we have IRB approval, and actually the 18 wasn't, that was not the thing they were most concerned about. The things that they were concerned about and that we were fortunate to get a good ruling on was the question of informed consent. Okay, well, you have to be informed about the experiment before you click the register buttons. Okay, fine, that's good. But then the ability to withdraw from the study at any time. And we got them to waive that on the basis that anybody can just leave the MOOC. They're not required in any way to participate. And so that was the decision.
Hi.
And also, we keep all of our identified data on a secure server not hooked up to the internet. And then we can de-identify that according to the MIT rules and use that. But I think that's obviously got to be part of it because you have to be very careful under the FERPA rules with data for minors.
I'm Rohit Naimpalli. I'm at the Poverty Action Lab here at MIT. So just a question on your outcome measures. So early on you said participation was one measure. Was that just based on participation in the discussion forum, or what do you use to measure participation?
No, actually, if you count the participation on the discussion forum, you will get numbers such as 5 or 3, which doesn't really make much sense. So participation is, for example, in the video experiments, we were trying to see, how much of the video do students watch before they start to get bored or before they skip to other units. And also students, only need to get 60% of the points, although we have very serious people. We also have people who selectively get 60% of the scores and then said, I'm done with it. And do these people choose to do these more interactive problems, or do they, once they've seen these interactive problems, are they still willing to do these more traditional type of problems? That's our question. Yeah.
I just had a follow-up on the IRB kind of question because, I have a bit of a developmental psych background too, and we've kind of run into this. And it really, regardless of how many, under 18 people you have, it really is an issue.
Okay.
And there are a couple different ways I think that you can approach it. So one thing that's going on in the developmental psychology world right now is a big discussion about we really need to make it easier, to get IRB approval for experiments that are kind of on this level, that are really not harmful, that are really educational pedagogy, that are things that maybe teachers would be doing anyway. So that's pretty easy to get that kind of, depending on your institution and whatever you have to go through. But typically, I think, it's pretty straightforward to try to apply for, a waiver of the whole informed consent if you're doing just manipulation of pretty straightforward educational pedagogy that's not going to damage anybody. It's just going to see if a different strategy helps, that kind of thing. And I know that several organizations are working on trying to apply that more easily to kids. You can get waivers of consent to test at a school, and they just haven't worked it out, for the online environment. But I think that, of course, in light of Facebook and all that stuff, we all want to be really careful and cover all our bases and all that stuff. But I think that the waivers, in light of that this is a change in educational pedagogy, we don't need to scare people from participating, and we do need this data, and it is really potentially very beneficial and not harmful manipulation of the structure of it. So as long as you start to frame it that way, we've always been able to do it that way.
Okay. Yes. whoever was the mic.
I am Dan Levy from Harvard Kennedy School,
Okay.
involved in Harvard X research.
Uh-huh.
I guess my question may be related to something you haven't done yet, because you
Okay.
haven't faced the data. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about the structure of the data you will be getting is such that you know, in a traditional classroom, you have the students, all right, they do this, and then they do this, and then they do that. In a
Yeah.
MOOC, you have no control over what they do or whether they do anything. And so, wondering how you dealt in the design of the experiments with the potential drop-off at different points of the experiment, the fact that some students might completely skip your treatment and go into the quiz directly, and then go back to the treatment. And so just that dynamic dimension of the MOOCs in which the learners are just doing whatever they want rather than what you have in mind for them, and how you dealt with that in the design, and if you have any thoughts on how you'll deal with that in the analysis of the data, that would be great.
Thank you. Great question. Basically, we didn't do much design on that. We try to design our experiments to be local experiments that doesn't expand through 2 units, because students might not do the other units. And we have this sequence of, you know, instructional content, homework, and quiz. And we are assuming that students follow the general path of looking at the content, doing the homework, and doing the quiz, or at least do the homework first before they do the quiz, because quiz are higher stakes, so it makes sense to at least practice on the homework and then do the quiz. Actually, I have a discussion. I have a discussion question myself that asks, how do we design these? Because my background, and I believe a lot of people's background, are from designing experiments for a traditional classroom where you have a lot of control over, students come in, they do this, I collect this and give it to them. How do we adjust to the MOOC population? And how do we adjust the design to the MOOC population? Yes. And so we're open to any suggestions. Thank you. Yes?
So Amy Bennett from the University of Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
I'm interested in, so let's say the data come back.
Okay.
And interactive design is better, small videos are better, shorter videos are better. At what point do you reconcile the investment required versus the outcome you expect? And do you plan to put that into your traditional classroom, which might make that investment a little bit easier to bear? So how do you deal with that?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would feel really lucky if it comes back and one group actually learns more than the other group, because, you know, I would be happy if I see some difference in behavior in the 2 groups, because MOOC is such a special population that eventually you're left with certificate earners who are really serious about it, and you can give them anything and they will do it. And in terms of justifying the cost, well, we actually didn't have a very good idea of how much effort it would take to create them before we created them. We're learning by doing, because these, you know, the more we create them, the easier it becomes. For example, these drag and drop problems, initially creating one drag and drop problem will take me half a day, because there are so many parameters that you have to measure the pixels on the graphs, it's ridiculous. And then as we created more and more of them, people started to join. I asked people, can you create a tool for us? Now we have this tool to create really fancy drag and drop problems in a matter of, you know, 10, 20 minutes if you have the design. And in terms of actually, I have another discussion question. Let me just show you all the discussion questions that I have. The other discussion question is, what criteria should we use to judge whether one pedagogy is better than another? Learning, engagement, more discussion? How do I do that? Hold on. Yeah. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can. Anyway, okay. let me do this later. So we're not, the answer is that also we're not sure what does it mean to be to say one instructional method is better than the other instructional method. Open to suggestions. Yes, that is that. I forgot. Is there another question that you had?
Yeah, I mean, it's just thinking about the outcome of your experiment.
Uh-huh.
So it's one thing to collect the data and analyze it, then what do you do about it? So are you prepared to do something about it, whether the resources take that or not? And if so, how? And if not,
Well, apparently, when we get the data and get the results, it's going to inform us what we did was good and what we did was not worth it. And then I hope it will tell us, you know, what we have done, what we could have done, and what we should have done in the future. And in the next run, we may, so for example, if we find one way of doing things is definitely better than the other, then we don't do it as an A/B test and we just implement it from then on and recommend it to the community, saying, you should really cut the videos into 2-minute segments. It's very easy to do and just do it. In other cases, we may find that, oh, we screwed up here, and we can keep it as an A/B test and find out, you know, if there's a better way that leads to better results. Thank you.
So some of the A/B tests you showed were kind of content specific in terms of they were directed toward understanding if one particular pedagogical practice was good for your particular class.
Mm-hmm.
Something that would be interesting to run in an A/B format, it would be to look at practices that kind of span lots of different MOOCs. A couple of examples of things that I'd like to know, actually, if you could figure them out, would be, for example, the hard deadlines versus soft deadlines. One of the questions that inspires great debate whenever we run our MOOC is, you know, wow, these deadlines are really tough and they're mean, and, you know, if we had softer deadlines, everything would be rosy. And we've run another MOOC where we've had soft deadlines and said the way around, well, hard deadlines, we like hard deadlines because it makes us get it done, and now we kind of procrastinate. A second question that would be interesting is the notion of running cohorts versus running it more self-paced.
Yeah.
You know, you could essentially, with the way we run it, one is essentially it's 1 week on one topic, you switch to the next week, everything's done, everything stays in sync.
Yep.
And on the other hand, you could imagine kind of some range where maybe you overlap weeks of content or you just let it be entirely self-paced. So if you had a kind of robust enough A/B infrastructure, I think those would be really interesting questions to answer, not just for your particular class, but in general, the pedagogy of MOOCs.
Yeah, exactly. Sure, other comments? Dave?
I was just going to make a little comment about that. We are really about last summer's course. After we ran we're on our 4th MOOC now, and at first we were just barely keeping ahead of the tidal wave in terms of getting the content out there. But subsequently, we've had the policy, especially since we've given these courses in the summer, that somebody be able to have the material available 4 weeks in advance, so that someone can go on a 1-month vacation and not lose any credit. But we do have deadlines for when the material, you know, when the tests are due, when the material is due. And what we find is that most of the students are pretty much in the current week. I mean, the discussions are current. They can get some response to discussion board. I don't know what it is, but mostly the students stay up. The majority of the students are basically.
Yeah, so let me respond,
sync.
because you've tried it one way, but I think one observation about a 14-week class, for example, is that we've run, I think 6 or 7 sessions now. And it's a hard and fast rule. Every week the class goes on when we run it, we lose 10% of our students because just life intervenes and people disappear in terms of, you know, things come up. My girlfriend broke up with me, and so I'd be curious to know, like running your course as a kind of a 14-week thing, if you thought about, for example, trying compressing it down to a 7-week thing versus running it as a 28-week thing, versus running it asynchronous, because I suspect that there's some dynamics in there in terms of how it fits the students that you're doing that would be very interesting to kind of pull out. And if you could do A/B testing, you could do that.
Yeah, although my view is I'm not responsible for the people who registered and then participated only peripherally or not at all. But in our courses, the people who've made an attempt at the second assignment, like a quarter of that, we find that half to 3/4 of them will actually get certificates. So we do not seem to be experiencing as rapid drop-offs as is in the other introductory physics MOOCs, and I don't know the reason. So that's not really high on our agenda right now. Although I think we do see, and I know in other cases, there's this very strong correlation of the dropout rate being people who have less educational background and less skill.
And also a comment I just thought about, I just realized that the current A/B testing structure does not allow you to fiddle with the deadlines. So you can give them different contents, but not different deadlines. For that, you have to have a new course. Yes?
Thanks. I keep forgetting to introduce myself before I talk.
Right, I guess everybody forgot. Most of the
Already-
people
I-
forgot.
But my name is Catherine, and I'm from UCSD.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I had a question, just sort of a general question for everybody too, but related to this. I think that it's important to distinguish between, right, learner preferences and things that help people learn, and sometimes they're the same thing, and sometimes they're really not. And I don't know how it all works out in MOOCs especially, because I think that, you know, oftentimes it's really important to cater to learner preferences because otherwise people drop out more easily, right?
Well, Susan
but,
this morning
you know,
just said the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you slice and
Yeah,
dice, right?
right.
Those kinds of experiments. But I think that that is something that I really, you know, want to start applying this experimental testing to, is like, are there things that learners really prefer? Like, they really like, you know, snappy YouTube videos, but they don't learn anything from them, you know, or find those golden things that they love and are good.
Actually, a comment on this. When we introduced these drag and drop problems, we first introduced it to our 80 beta testers, and 10, 20 of them are really serious. And I got bipolar responses. I mean, of course, anybody who bothers to respond is going to be sort of on one end or the other, but there are people who said, this is the greatest thing that I've ever seen in MOOCs. And there are people who absolutely hated it because they can't get it to. So I think when I was designing these experiments, my mindset was still in the classroom. My student simulator in my brain was still simulating the undergrad students that I interacted with in the classroom, not this broad spectrum. And then the other problem is that we really didn't thought about it, was that some people are taking these MOOCs on iPads. And these drag and drop problems, despite the fact that they look like they should be draggable with your finger, actually do not. People hated it. So we really have a wide spectrum of population that we need to deal with. And requires a lot of data mining in the end to tease out, you know, if there's one population that loves drag and drop, and there's another who really hates it, and what's the difference? Thank you. Okay, so I finally pulled up all the discussion questions that I wrote up the other day that I wish to stir some discussions. So we've sort of covered other innovative instructional methods worth putting online and testing via A/B experiments. Welcome any suggestions. And then how should we design our experiments to suit this unique MOOC population, as I just mentioned, you know? These people behave rather differently from our in-class students. And if we want to study, for example, are people engaging more or not engaging more? Should we be looking into the certificate earners or not, or the people who drop at the middle of the way? Things like that. One thing that I think we haven't touched so far is this. How do we design effective assessment of learning when students have the freedom to access essentially any external resource they have? We are not in a closed book exam era anymore. It's all open book exam. Any ideas, anybody?
Should, you know, I think he made this point earlier that in some sense, if they're using external resources and are actually working in the spirit of learning, then it's fine for them to use external resources because that's the reality of the world we work in.
True, but then how do you know that the difference that you're seeing is caused by the thing that you did in the A/B experiments, not that Group B suddenly discovered a better resource out there, or Group B has more population in the United States where they can access this YouTube video, where Group A has more Indian population where they are, or Chinese population where they're blocked from this?
Well, I think that's just a limitation of working in an open enrollment online class, that you may not be able to have such precisely controlled experiments, but you might be able to compensate with massive numbers that might give you some statistical competence.
Okay.
And I think our tools will get more sophisticated. You know, you can quickly geographically track people and put those on the analysis.
That is
kind of
awesome.
tools problem.
Okay. Dan?
Hi, Jen. Daniel Seaton from MIT.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the discussion, I'm shooting from the hip here, so bear with me. But it seems like, in regard to your question, how should we design our experiments, potentially putting these sort of A/B tests into a very independent module from the course could be quite interesting. Between 801X, 802X, and 8MRev, you probably have 14 to say 15,000 people who've got a certificate. And emailing those people and asking them to participate in beta testing one of these modules could get you a lot of people. You could very easily give an entrance survey to find out who they are, and then begin sort of splicing on how they interact with these different modules in a very contained setting. It even could possibly get around the issue of 18-year-olds, because you can simply say, if you're not 18, please don't take this. But it's not to say you shouldn't do things in course, but you could very quickly design something that you could put out there for people to do.
The one concern I have regarding to your suggestion is that are these beta testers, can you treat these beta testers equivalent as your normal students, right? Because they are certificate earners, they are themselves a special population, right?
Sure, and but this is an experiment, right?
And that brings me to the other question that I have on the list, which just gone blue, is that to what extent can we safely say that the results we obtained through a MOOC experiments can be transferred to a flipped classroom despite the great difference in population? Teppo, yeah.
Teppo Joe from edX. So also thinking about the question of assessments when you have open materials. If we think of learning, research, and really getting to the nuts and bolts of what exact things help people, then there's clearly benefits of having very contained experiments that test just one thing. But I think that if we think from the other side of the spectrum, that we want to educate people to be contributing citizens and good professionals, then, like was commented, that's the world of open resources. So with the large statistics and knowing that that's how lots of things work, I think A/B testing could still give us guidance. Maybe it would be challenging to find out exactly the dynamics, but yeah, I'd love to see lots of assessment moving to a situation that cannot be gamed with open resources, because that's the real world problems that the students will be facing.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks. What I'm just saying is that the things that we are putting online right now sort of evolved from a closed book format, traditional closed book format, and how to evolve them into suiting this on open book format is a challenge that we need to face. Thank you. Anybody else?
I have one more question.
Okay,
So I
sure.
actually do everything on Coursera, so I've just poked around in edX a little bit.
Okay,
I'm from Rice, I'm Joe Warren.
okay.
So is the A/B testing actually available in edX Studio? This is one of the things that aggravate me. Sometimes there's things that are available kind of in the private version that go out early, and then you go use edX Studio.
Okay.
To access.
I created, this is a very early adoption of the A/B test. It just rolled out and we just adopted it. And the same thing can be said about anything that is just rolled out. It involves a lot of work, and it involves XML and doing things by hand. To this day, I haven't seen an official release that it is available in Studio, but I have seen draft documentation that it will be. Yeah, Temple.
I can just comment very briefly. So last I heard, which is about a month ago, 95% of it was in Studio. So you had to set up your cohort setup in XML and import it in, and then everything else you could do in Studio. And yeah, but we are really pushing hard to get it fully there. It may already be there, or maybe in next few weeks, next few months.
Yeah, so when I edited it, I need to set up the A/B testing in XML. And once I set it up and imported it, I can view the content and edit the content. You just need to have the A/B group infrastructure in there. And in the draft documentation that I saw, they have a model of the what the interface would look like to, for you to click a button and say, I have group A and group B and group C. That's in the near future. That's all I can say. Yeah. You don't want to work with XML nowadays when student courses are in Studio. Right. Okay. Anything else?
My name is Saif Rayyan.
Hi.
I worked with Dave Pritchard on making MREV before it became MREV. And I mean, most of the time I spend my time sort of making new MOOCs, so I never have time to actually test them. But I think there are two differences I can see here, because I have exposure and have some background in education research, but I think of myself mostly as teaching physics and trying to figure out what is it that I want to do in my class. And I think A/B testing could be a tool for research, but could also be a tool for teachers to figure out what is it that they want to do. And I think that sometimes might be even more powerful, because I really doubt that you can get enough control to do A/B studies to figure out how attrition will vary when you do the course. It takes a huge time to really build one of these courses and run them, and I have even doubts that you can really split the course into 3 groups. It's like you're running 3 different sections at the same time.
I think people have done studies like this. For example, they've done studies about how forums behave, and people they built forums that are music sharing sites. They split into 6 or 7 cohorts that are kind of transparent to all the users, and they study the behavior of how the forums work. So I think it's really just a question of the platform builders, that they can put the functionality in there. You can answer a lot of questions. I'm not saying it's easy. Of course, there is not. I don't know where they are on A/B testing. I've heard rumors that they have some secret bill that has A/B testing on it, but I've never seen any hide or hair of it. But I think it's interesting if you could do that, because we talked a little bit about attrition rates, and I kind of have my theory about how it works, but you have a different theory. And the way to settle it is we could have infrastructure that we could build classes on. I think we could really answer these questions.
And report to each other. I think that these experiments have to be run and rerun in different contexts with different populations, because we teach physics, and what we see in physics is probably very different from what you see in other contexts.
That's why I like A/B testing, because in some sense you can just isolate this single variable in there. Now I realize class length and things like that are going to be tricky to do, but you're hard deadline versus soft deadline. That's something that sounds like it's not impossible to do in the current infrastructure, and you could basically have one cohort that gets a different deadline or a different set of deadlines on there. That to me would be again an interesting question that would apply to lots of classes.
But I would really like to see people use this stuff, and one of the things that I think about is that MOOCs are a lot of things. So you do a MOOC, and I like the idea of sort of running the MOOC over and over again, where you get to the point where you tweak your content, you're trying to figure out, as a teacher, what is it that works for you best, and if more of the community do these things and share them, I think of it as like consumer research more than just education research, because the overhead in running education research, you have to have a group like Dave Pritchard or someone else to really do these studies. But as a teacher, we can share experiences by, I'm doing this with my students and I think this worked. I just feel that the infrastructure is there, it's done by edX, but maybe there should be some guidelines for
I think there's one piece that is missing for it to be able to do what you do, is that right now, if I click on the instructor dashboard and wanted to see how many students in Group A did it and how many students in Group B did it, I was explicitly told that the numbers are not trustworthy. So there's some issue with the A/B testing structure and the instructor dashboard export that doesn't allow me to do it. So I think if we can, in real time when the course is running, see the effects of A/B testing, then that will be a very valuable thing. Otherwise, you have to have a data miner to tell you what it does. Yeah. Yeah, Dave.
When I started attacking my when I made the decision to push my education research group away from mastering physics and into the broader edX thing, one of the big reservations that I had and continue to have about MOOCs is what a dumb idea in the following sense. We know that the internet is really suited to individualize television programming, for instance. And in fact, it has had a very deleterious effect on network television, because now you can watch just the particular news program with the viewpoint that you like or whatever it is. Why is this idea of inventing network education the wave of the future? And I want to just ask here, say, as we now get 3, 4, 5, 10 introductory physics courses, should we all be trying to take and educate all comers, like the MOOC philosophy? Or mightn't it be a lot better to, say, have one concentrate on professional people, another concentrate for teachers, another concentrate for people trying to take advanced placement tests, which is actually what we're trying to do this spring? I mean, what's the feeling that you should, how many people think, I really love the idea of MOOCs and I want to keep them open to all comers? And how many people think, oh, it might be really better to specialize because we could get better research and find treatments that are suited for just that cohort? So how many people are the generalists? How many people here want come on, Teppo, you're in edX.
That's why I am neutral.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess. And how many people think it might be a good idea to specialize more to a particular cohort? 1, 2, 3, 4. What if you think both? You have to include. You can vote twice if you want, yeah. 1, 2, 3. So that's about 7, 8.
I think it depends too if you see these as like remedial, right? Or like it's a little bit all about the money, right? I mean, it's kind of like, well, what are Department of Education interested in funding, or are we trying to do something remedial? Are we trying to do something like that you can't get in schools? I think there are all these people trying to do all these things. So I don't know, there are all these different ways to approach it.
So you're really a specialist.
So
all MOOCs shouldn't do all these things.
No, I don't think they can. I think that in this country, right, we have such an issue with standardization, like in the education system, and kind of pushing for it, like the universal mediocrity or something like that. But at the same time, like, it's a valid concern that you want everybody to like have access to the same thing, that equal playing field, which we also very much value. So if you decide it's really important to those kids who like don't have pre-algebra and you need to level them up or something, then you're going to be more focused on universally accessible, or maybe remedial is kind of a negative word, but just that kind of foundational thing. Or maybe you're really more interested in like what do schools not provide at all. I don't know which we have a bigger need for, but yeah, it seems like people are more willing to fund like things that immediately will pay off in terms of workforce.
I think it's partly just a function of who we are. We, meaning those of us who produce MOOCs. We are primarily college faculty members who teach these general courses. And it's not that we're trying to not do specialized courses. As something like 70% of MOOC learners are college educated. And I think that's basically, when we produce things here at MIT, we tend to produce things that are of MIT quality. And so I'm producing a MOOC right now. And yesterday we had one of the final meetings, and I looked at it and I said, gee, this is way too hard. It's not what I intended. I wanted this to be much broader, in fact, and available for high school students, but it's sort of natural that we come to this kind of content and assessment, and it's we have to change who we are if we're going to go where you want to go.
And this brings me to something that I really wanted to have in the any MOOC platform, which is badges, which means that you can say, I have this module that says Angular Momentum Level 1. And you master that, and you said, I'm Angular Momentum Level 1. You're allowed to go to Angular Momentum Level 2 at any time you choose, or you're allowed to go to Conservation of Angular Momentum Level 1. So that right now, as a MOOC creator, I think these huge courses are too big of a beast for anybody to tackle, because to run this one course sucked up all of our energies, and we really stretched ourselves pretty thin to design these experiments and make one good unit. So I'm a big advocate of having smaller, more unit-like MOOCs, so that each MOOC can be well designed, and then you're more custom. You can have your own custom learning paths, taking one badge after another, and then for you can have level 1, level 2, level 3, level impossible. That's what I want. Yeah. Okay. I think time is up. I'm happy to talk to anybody after this, and so thank you all for attending.